How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the 1IQ Sports Talk YouTube channel. Brendan and Sterling coming at you for round 2 of this 2.0 mock draft. Again, we aren't doing any trades, and if you missed yesterday's video, go back and watch it so you can get all the first 32 picks in this draft. But let's get back into this one, Sterling. Starting off with pick number 33, that is the Cleveland Browns with this one, and they are ultimately going to be selecting, as I try to find him here, that is going to be corner Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. The Browns, again, they're just one of these teams here at the moment. They just need to improve this roster as best they can. They have a decent secondary, but adding another young corner to this mix can really make them look good. Again, the AFC North, you have to deal with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, so that's going to be a factor. We saw the Steelers in round 1 draft a corner, or pardon me, a wide receiver to hopefully try to make that an effective unit. And so when you're the Browns and you have the amount of holes that you have here at the moment, you can't really afford to not and try to just take best player available.
Yeah, best player available on defense for this Browns team still. I agree. Just find ways to beat up on your rivals on the defensive side of the ball.
The New York Giants ended up selecting their franchise quarterback in round number 1, and they do have a really talented wide receiver in Malik Nabers, but if you want Shedeur Sanders to have the most amount of success, you need to give him a handful of weapons. And Elic Amanor, wide receiver out of Stanford, also Canadian kid born in Medicine Hat. I think this would be a great addition for the Giants because one of the biggest things that we talked about with this Giants team for years was they never gave Daniel Jones a ton of weapons to deal with. You need to change that this time with Shedeur Sanders. You already have Malik Nabers. At least give him another young receiver to work with and give him at least 2 options to throw the ball to.
Yeah, more offensive weapons for the Giants. That's what they need.
Tennessee Titans would have loved to have Amanor fall to him, but nonetheless, they also ended up drafting a quarterback in the first round here, and they actually select Gray Zabel, the tackle out of North Dakota State. While wide receiver is probably a bigger pressing issue for this team, you need to be able to give Cam Ward enough time to be protected, just making sure that his life is as easy as possible in front of him. And you do have some running back talent in that Tennessee Titans team, and by allowing Zabel to come in as an offensive lineman, you're opening up more holes and you're just making your quarterback's life easier. You've drafted 2 offensive linemen in the first round the last 2 years, adding a third here in the second. It's a nice way to build up this O-line.
Yeah, that makes sense to me as well. I mean, if you can't find a playmaker, get someone to protect your quarterback.
Next up is the Jacksonville Jaguars. We talked about them not drafting a corner in the first round. They're drafting a corner here in the second round. Jaheed Barron, the corner out of Texas. They have a really poor secondary, and by drafting this kid here in the second with their defensive line that's going to be in front of them, this kid could potentially have a handful of interceptions in his rookie year and look fairly decent with a good defensive line in front of him.
Yeah, just keep working on the defense for Jacksonville. I agree.
With this next pick for the Las Vegas Raiders, I have them selecting Dillon Gabriel, quarterback out of Oregon. Raiders didn't have an opportunity to draft a quarterback in the first round. They do not make this mistake here in the second. They need to find someone. And again, we're not doing trades in this particular mock, but even if the Raiders aren't successfully able to trade up, you can't go into next season with Aiden O'Connell being your number 1 option. Dillon Gabriel, he was a Heisman Trophy finalist this year. Pretty much the biggest knock on him is his size, only being around 5'11", just getting to around that 200-pound mark. So he's undersized, but if you have the right offense around him, and now having Ashton Jeanty as your starting running back with Brock Bowers to throw the ball to, if you have the right coaching staff, you can make something happen. And you know what? If Dillon Gabriel as your starting quarterback next year shows that he isn't that good and you end up with a top 3 pick, well, guess what? You're going to be able to draft a quarterback in the first round next year. This to me feels like pretty much just like a win-win.
Yeah. You got to roll the dice on a quarterback at some point. draft, and Gabriel is probably your best option if you can't get one of those first two in the first round.
Patriots got a very high level player in Travis Hunter, and I think they also continue to add to that defensive side of the ball in Tyleik Williams, the defensive tackle from Ohio State. Again, we know Mike Vrabel, he's going to want to make sure this defense is as good as humanly possible, and to just really make that team as solid as they possibly can. And Williams, he's going to be a good player up the middle for the Patriots.
Yeah, that's what they want. They want to find ways. Vrabel will want ways to stop the Bills, and defense is how you do that.
Next up on the list is my Chicago Bears with the pick that they received from the Carolina Panthers, and they need to continue working on the trenches, but this time instead of the offensive side of the ball, they go defensive side of the ball with edge rusher Landon Jackson from Arkansas. Landon Jackson, he is 6'7", 280 pounds. You are going to put him on the opposite side of Montez Sweat and say, okay, you're going to be able to get run stopping ability. And he was phenomenal at getting after the quarterback in the SEC this year. I think the Bears get a really, really solid player here and make that edge rushing tandem for the Bears actually somewhat threatening.
Yeah. The Bears tried this last year and it didn't quite work out. I don't know if they give up on it yet. I think the O-line is still the more crucial spot. And so if they haven't picked anybody up in free agency, I think they probably would still go O-line in the spot.
The New Orleans Saints, again, with their first round pick, they ended up selecting Will Campbell. Again, they're just in a situation where it is simply best player available. And right now it happens to be TJ Sanders from South Carolina. He's a big defensive lineman who's going to be able to rush the passer. And when you're the Saints, again, this entire draft is just best player available.
100%. Best player available, get in those rookie deals.
Next up for the Chicago Bears with their pick now, I have them selecting running back out of Arizona State, Cam Skattebo. There's something about this kid that I just look at and go, I think he is going to be an absolute monster in the NFL. He is slowly turning into my draft crush this particular year. He was a guy that was counted out his entire college career, and he's worked, and this year he should have been a Heisman finalist. He was probably the second most efficient back in college football, only behind Ashton Jeanty. Is he going to test particularly well at the combine? Probably not. But he just has that worker mentality of where he's going to outwork everyone. And I think the Bears kind of need that guy at that running back position. I don't think DeAndre Swift is the team's top running back. And I think whoever the head coach is going to be for the Bears next year, they're going to need that type of running back. And I think Skattebo is... There's just something about him that tells me he's going to be successful in the NFL. And I think if he goes to the Bears, maybe with Ben Johnson, he's going to be able to find a way. And I think this is just one of those moves that I think is going to shock a lot of people in the NFL. But I think it's ultimately going to be one of those moves where people go back a few years later and go, that was a smart move by the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to roll the dice when you've got 3 picks in the top 50, using that third pick for it is the way to go, and roll the dice on somebody. I don't particularly like this pick just because you've already got a bunch of money in DeAndre Swift and a lot of other offensive weapons, and you need to, much like the last pick, you got to protect Caleb Williams. And so I disagree with this pick, but it would be a good gamble pick for sure.
New York Jets at pick 42. They're finding their quarterback at this point, and that's going to be Jalen Milroe, quarterback out of Alabama. Jalen Milroe is one of those guys where he's basically... He's that meme of he is the most gifted athletic quarterback that you've ever seen. The problem is he can't throw a football. This just happens to be kind of one of those Jets types pick. And depending on who the head coach is for this team, whether it's an offensive-minded guy, you need to bring in someone in this draft class at the quarterback spot. Yes, it's a weak quarterback class, but if you can just get this guy, and I know we're talking about the Jets here, and if you can develop him, he could turn into a situation of where he ends up being a really decent quarterback. And the Jets, they just need to try any option at QB just to try to fix this situation.
Yeah, the Jets need a quarterback. Milroe's there. You take him. I feel bad for Milroe having to go to New York and play for the Jets because, I mean, enjoy your resurgence in 5 years when you're with a new team and all of a sudden people are like, oh, hey, Milroe is good.
Yeah. Next up here, the 49ers, I have them selecting Darian Porter, the corner out of Iowa State. They got their first round tackle, and I think they just need to continue trying to build up that defense where you have some older spots, and I think Porter is going to be able to come in. He's going to kind of be one of those forgotten guys on that defense that ultimately is just capable of doing a decent job at just building it up.
Yeah, at this point, the 49ers, they're approaching cap hell.
Yeah.
So they're going to need to start getting some rookie contracts into some of these key positions where guys are going to be moved from.
They're not quite in the Saints level of cap hell, but in a couple
They're
years
close.
it might be a situation. Dallas Cowboys up next. I have them selecting JT, the edge rusher out of Ohio State. They could be losing Micah Parsons as early as this offseason because of his contract that he's going to be wanting. And frankly, they just need to continue to add to that defensive side of the ball and just really help bolster that throughout this offseason period.
Yeah, I mean, shore up that defense. It wouldn't shock me at all to see the Cowboys at this position, though, reach and try to get a running back.
Next up is the Colts. We talked about them in the first round in yesterday's video as just needing to go defense. And Jaheed Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama, it's a need for them at linebacker, and you can't go wrong with just adding any level of defensive player to this Colts team.
Yeah, 100%. Bengals need defense. Every pick in this draft should be a defensive player.
Yeah, Colts, they need it, man. They need it. Next up, the Falcons. I have them selecting edge rusher out of Marshall, Mike Green, the highest production for sacks in college football this year. He's one of those guys, again, he's coming from a pretty weak conference, so you're seeing some of those numbers be inflated, but Mike Green, man, he's a fun player to watch. And if you're the Falcons, with how bad your edge rushing has been this year and your pass rushing has been, just getting two players that can attack the quarterback, and with Walker in the first round, you can definitely go back and look at it and go, he can play both linebacker and edge rusher, so this kind of works out for both of us. Next up for the Cardinals, I have them selecting offensive lineman Cameron Williams out of Texas. This is a guy that's been steadily falling throughout this year, which is unfortunate because I think he's a phenomenal right tackle. You got yourself a really good wide receiver in the first round in Emeka Egbuka, but you still need to protect Kyler Murray, and getting some help on the opposite side from your former first round pick who was out of Ohio State 2 years ago. You're just helping build up that offensive line just that little bit more.
Yeah. Cardinals need to open up some more holes for the run game and get some more protection for Kyler Murray so he doesn't feel like he has to scramble so much.
Next up is the Miami Dolphins. They picked an offensive lineman in the first round. Guess what, folks? I'm getting them to pick another offensive lineman here in this round. That is Ozzy Trapalo out of Boston College. It's simple. Tua needs to stay healthy. We know that he takes too many hits. Some are on his own, but if you can limit the hits and that he takes and keep him healthy as much as humanly possible throughout this year, that to me is probably the best strategy for Miami. And when you have multiple holes on the offensive line, drafting two guys in the first 2 rounds is probably a pretty good idea for Miami.
Yeah, O-line just makes sense for Miami. Wouldn't shock me to see them try and fill some defensive gaps up the middle, but O-line makes more sense.
Cincinnati Bengals, like the Indianapolis Colts before them, they need to spend pretty much their first 3 round picks pretty solely on the defensive side of the ball. We got them Kenneth Grant in the first round, the defensive tackle. I'm continuing building up that defensive line, and they're getting Ashton Gillety, the edge rusher out of Louisville. And Trey Hendrickson, he should be the defensive player of the year, and he was phenomenal. He basically had no help on that defensive line. Now he's going to have a playmate to work with on the opposite side. And when you know that Trey Hendrickson is pretty much the only guy that was able to apply pressure last year early in the season, he's going to be double teamed most of the time. This is going to be a good pick for the Bengals.
100%. Yeah. Defense for Cincinnati.
Moving forward to the Seattle Seahawks, I have them selecting linebacker Carson Schwellinger, the linebacker out of UCLA. Again, linebacker is kind of one of those needs for this team. They went with a defensive tackle. Now they're just really shoring up that defense. Again, Mike Macdonald, he was a defensive coordinator. He's a defensive minded guy, and he's going to want that middle linebacker to really shore up that defense.
Yeah, that's important for the Seahawks team. I mean, you've got James Conner, Benson. I'm just blanking. Christian McCaffrey, you're going to be dealing with regularly, like
Jordan
Kyren
Mason,
Williams. So
yeah.
you got to stop the run game for this Seahawks team.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they do need some secondary help, so I have them selecting the second best safety in the class, Xavier Watts, out of Notre Dame. Again, for the Buccaneers, not necessarily wide receivers that they really like at this point. I think Mike Evans with Baker Mayfield at this point, I think that connection has been really good. Cade Orton, their tight end, has been phenomenal, and I think building up that defense is what's really going to separate them over these next couple of years. And this to me feels like a good pick.
100%. Build up that defense and worry about getting extra depth on offense in the later rounds.
Exactly. Denver Broncos, they selected the best tight end in the class. I still feel like they need to add more weapons to this team, and Jaden Higgins, the wide receiver out of Iowa State, is going to be a good option for them. A little bit more pass catching for Bo Nix to have out there. And again, with Warren out there, you're not necessarily going to have to worry about your second round wide receiver being double teamed or having a lot of pressure put on top of him. And Higgins is going to be able to come in being that true number 2 for this team, and just continuing to add more weapons for Bo Nix.
Yeah, they need another option behind Courtland Sutton. Good option.
Your Pittsburgh Steelers, I have them selecting running back Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. He's little less of the bang style of running back like a Najee Harris, but he's one of those guys that is just going to be a lightning rod. Like, he might be one of my favorite backs in this class behind Scatabo. He shows me a lot of, Lord, who's the running back in New Orleans?
Kamara.
Yeah, he gives me a lot of Alvin Kamara vibes, and is that what Pittsburgh needs here at the moment? I don't necessarily know, but if they lose both of their starting running backs this year, because chances are they might do that, even if they extend Najee Harris, I still think this would be a good move, because then you have that Sonic and Knuckles type situation that's going on with Detroit. Sampson is nowhere near the same speed as Jahmyr Gibbs, but he reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara. I think this would be a really solid pick for the Steelers.
Yeah, if they move on from both the running backs or even one of them, would make a lot of sense. Only way I see them going elsewhere is if for some reason Gabriel or Milroe either fall to this position, I could see the Pittsburgh Steelers jumping on a quarterback.
Fair. Next up for the Los Angeles Chargers, we talked about Khalil Mack potentially retiring at the end of this year, but they ultimately went offense. Donovan, the edge rusher out of Boston College, I feel like is going to be someone who can come in. They had an edge rusher drafted out of UCLA a few years ago or from USC a few years ago. That looks like he can be a nice little player, but they still need to shore up some of that edge rushing room and really just, if Khalil Mack is really going to retire this year, they need to continue to try to fill holes on that side of the ball. For the Green Bay Packers, I have them selecting edge rusher Kyle Kennard from South Carolina. Again, you have a lot of offensive firepower in this division that you are going to have to deal with. You need to get some more edge rushing help. And again, that Packers defense isn't really all that great. So just adding some help up the middle is definitely going to be something that's going to help them out. The Buffalo Bills, I have them selecting Jack Beach, the wide receiver out of TCU. Josh Allen has been phenomenal this year with the lack of weapons. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get him weapons. And Beach is going to be able to come in and provide some really good receiving for Josh Allen. And if you're only having to spend a second round pick on that to get a talented guy, you're going to, without a doubt, take that.
Yeah, that
The
one surprises me a little more. Just I expect the Bills to do a lot more defense in this draft with how well the offense has performed.
I hear it. It's just one of those things. I think adding some wide receiver help at this stage, because I do
Mhm.
think they're going to add a few more guys to the defense in terms or in free agency. So like it could be kind of either way from that standpoint. But I get what you're saying. Next up is the Houston Texans, and I have them selecting Xavier Restrepo, the wide receiver out of Miami. Again, Tank Dell, he's already had 2 season-ending knee injuries or lower body injuries. Stephon Diggs is not going to be re-signing with the Texans this year. You can't just play with Nico Collins and that's it. And you got an offensive lineman in the first round, but you need to give CJ Stroud some more weapons to throw the ball to.
Yeah, yeah. If you don't think John Mechie III can be a true number 2 behind Nico Collins, then you need to take a wide receiver.
Carolina Panthers, with the pick that they received from the Rams, they select Omar Norman Lott, the defensive tackle from Tennessee, continuing to just build up that defense side of the ball. Their defense was pretty bad this year, and with the improvements that we saw from Bryce Young, you have to feel like they're going to try to sign a wide receiver free agent this year to just try to bring in some more experience, and they're really going to try to build up this defense through the draft.
Yeah, trenches for this team at this point. Either side of the ball would be acceptable, but defense makes a little more sense. Try and slow down your competitors.
For the Washington Commanders selecting an edge rusher in the first round, I'm giving them Ariante Arasi, the tackle out of Minnesota. Jaden Daniels was phenomenal this year.
Mhm.
He didn't take a ton of excruciating hits, but you don't really want to play that gamble game going into year number 2 because, again, he's a smaller framed quarterback, and if he takes a big hit, we know that he has been injury prone throughout his college career, and he did suffer an injury this year. You need to protect him at all costs. The Ravens here at pick number 60, I have them selecting Zay Alexander, the corner out of LSU. We talked about that secondary being really, really bad. They ended up getting their tackle of the future in the first round. They get their secondary help right here with Zay Alexander. Buffalo
Yeah,
Bills.
100%. They've got to shore up that defense.
Yeah, badly. And Buffalo
Yeah.
Bills with their second round pick, I have them selecting Chris Paul Jr., linebacker out of Ole Miss. Again, continuing to build up that defense. And that was one of the reasons why I felt comfortable with them taking a wide receiver earlier in this round, because they did have another second round pick not too far away. I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 4 picks difference between that. So they were able to get some offense, and they're also able to still get a defender that is also a position of need for them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Philadelphia Eagles, they are going to select Tyler Booker, guard out of Alabama. Again, guard isn't necessarily the biggest need for the Eagles so far in the season, but it is their biggest need on their offensive side of the ball, or on their offensive line, I should say. And we know Howie Roseman, he just builds through the trenches. He always brings in either offensive lineman or defensive lineman. This is not going to be a shock to me if they end up selecting Tyler Booker.
No.
Chiefs with their second round pick, I'm actually going to give them Gunnar Helm, the tight end out of Texas. We know Travis Kelce isn't going to be around for much longer, if going into next year. Noah Gray has shown to be a decent tight end number 2. Is he going to be able to take that next step? I feel like Helm is going to be a guy that could potentially take over for Travis Kelce as early as next year.
Yeah, and that's just it. If Noah Gray can't fill the shoes of Travis Kelce, then you bring in another guy so the two of them combined can.
And with our final pick of this video, the Detroit Lions, again, they go defense on this one, and they also go defensive line here, and they select Alfred Collins, the defensive tackle out of Texas, to really just continue to improve that D-line. Again, that's also going to help Aiden Hutchinson take pressure away from him as much as possible, and with how banged up that D-line from the Lions has been this year, it's something where you are definitely going to need to make sure that everyone is protected, or is you have as many attackers as humanly possible, and that's where I feel the Lions are going to go.
Yeah, D-line makes sense. The only other thing I could see them doing is if there is a safety or cornerback available, that would be another need, because you got to deal with Justin Jefferson and DJ Moore twice a year every year.
That is going to be it for this video. Thank you all very much for joining us here on 1IQ Sports Talk for this mock draft 2.0. Thank you, Sterling, for joining me for this to get some of those extra insights. But that is it for this video. Peace.